I'm tired. It's a great way to start off a stream by being tired. I'm probably gonna wait like another minute before I start reviewing cards to see if anyone joins, but it's probably going to be a short stream anyway. I just want to test this out because I don't know how well it's going to work. But I made quite the spreadsheet, so I put pretty much every single card that I made on stream into one giant spreadsheet. I did a little bit of, I don't even want to say analysis, but just a little bit of numbers to determine what types of cards I make too much of and what types of cards I don't make enough of. My main takeaways from that are that actually, like, hold on, my mana curve is actually not that bad. So you can see this is Rise of Shadows mana curve for the entire expansion, minus 1 12 cost card or something like that. No, this is it actually, because Jumbo Imp is 10 mana. So this is the entire mana curve for Rise of Shadows, and this is the mana curve for cards we've designed on stream. So really the only thing that we're lacking in is 8+ cards. We've made like one 10 cost card, and that's like it. So our mana curve is actually not bad, as for how well we match Blizzard's mana curve of the sign. Our rarity curve is not not amazing. We have 34 commons compared to 60 rares, compared to 58 epics, compared to 22 legendaries. And I don't think that really surprises, it doesn't really surprise me. I don't think it should surprise anyone that I tend to top heavy on the rarity. I mean, I've said this before, but like, I've been in the community a while, so like, I tend to go for the more complex designs, a little bit more flashy. That's probably not a surprise to anybody. But it means that we'll probably be trying to make a little bit more commons here and there, because making commons is a thing that needs to happen. And designing good pack fillers is always better than designing bad pack fillers. So, and I guess so I'll just talk about the purpose of what I'm doing here. So I've said this before on stream, but part of the streaming thing is kind of an experiment to see what would happen if I made 10 cards a day for a month, and at the end you have 300 cards, and what trends can you pull from that? How can I grow as a designer? What lessons are there to be learned, and how can I give advice to others based on those lessons that I've learned? And so one key part of that is that I need to evaluate the cards. So step one was putting them into a spreadsheet and doing like a little bit of numbers on them. I still want to do one thing I haven't done is check the class. So I want to check the class and see what classes I designed the most for. But this is step one. We have currently made 174 cards. So anyway, 174 cards. But yeah, that's step one, is to put them into a sheet, make some trends, and then step two is to like actually review them and find the good cards, find the bad cards, and start getting some lessons learned. I don't think it's too early for that because we're pretty much halfway done. We're a little bit more than halfway done. So I guess that's what we're going to be doing, is just reviewing those cards. This is also greatly inspired by Burb, who notoriously writes a lot about his cards. I'm trying to think that there's one other person that writes more. I can't think who it is, but Burb wrote like a 30,000 word document for Sands of Time, and basically did a pretty in-depth review / history of every single card. it basically included like how to discard, what was the design process, and then what are like regrets, what are your thoughts about balance, stuff like that. And so I thought it was very cool. Not a lot of people probably read it. I've read a decent amount of it. At least like some of the most controversial or interesting cards I've read the entries for. So that's kind of inspired by that. This is kind of inspired by that. And so the way that I'm doing this is I'm rating each card on design, balance, and flavor. And I'm using a really weird rating scale. So this is probably, to those of you who know me from the Discord, this is probably not a surprise that I use weird rating scales. And I like to make up these dumb rating scales that no one agrees with. But I think this is finally a good time for me to like actually be able to use them and people not get mad at me, because this is partially a personal evaluation. And so the rating scales are, design is out of 5 stars, which is 1 to 5 basically. Balance is out of 3 stars, but you can have a 0, which is like weird, but I'll explain kind of why. And then flavor uses the same stars, so it's 0 stars to 3 stars. So 1 to 5 should be pretty simple. This is like a very common rating scale. It can be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No in betweens. You have to pick. I was honestly considering just making it a 4-star scale and using the same as the same ratings across. And I haven't started rating the cards, so there's a chance that we could still switch to that. I'm not sure which rating I'll remove, but I have a feeling that there's gonna be some times where I really can't tell if something is 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 or 4 or 5. 5 is simultaneously a lot and not a lot to choose from. So we'll see about that. But I think 1 to 5 is pretty reasonable, and there's some little explanations. This is probably the most straightforward and most important. So like the weird stuff is a bit less important, but the balance category, the reason that there's a 0-star category is because it exists to categorize cards which are completely unbalanceable. Like their effect has no way to modify it such that you could create a balanced card out of it, or you would have to make it so unplayable that like it would be completely garbage design. Like if you made a 1/1 minion that said battle cry, 10% chance to win the game, like the card would be bad at 5 mana, but like you would have to put it like at 10 mana. This is probably a bad example because that card is so poorly designed that it would never even exist. But a 0-star balance is reserved for stuff that like is basically unbalanceable. I'm hesitant to put Baku and Gen in this category, but I think that would be like my first go-to. Is like those cards are like extremely difficult to balance without like ruining them basically. The bodies are already bad for both cards. You could make them worse, but that wouldn't change the cards too much. So that would be a 0-star balance basically. And so if a card is presented and like, so the image is on the left and the card itself, the image that I've made, is actually unbalanced, like too strong or a bit too weak, it'll probably actually get a 2-star balance rating, which means it's balanceable, and then it needs playtesting. Something I push a lot in the community is that no one knows how to evaluate cards just by looking at them. Pros don't know how to do it, designers don't know how to do it, Blizzard doesn't know how to do it. That's why we playtest. That's why designers playtest. And so the most important feature of a card is not its balance, but its balanceability. So really this should be called balanceability rating, but I think people might get tripped up on that. But that's more what this is. It's about balanceability. A 2-star card is one that is probably not balanced in its current state, but could be balanced. A 3-star is for cards which are like in their state very balanced and like worst case scenario can still be tweaked. And a 1-star card is 1 star is kind of reserved for cards that are very difficult to balance without ruining the card or are heavily polarized. So if something is really bad in its worst scenario and really good in its best scenario, that's basically reserved for 1-star rating. So that's the balanceability rating. And then finally flavor. Flavor is also really weird, so I'll explain. This is a scale that I theorized on the Discord a while ago, so some people might be familiar with it. On the Discord I call it 0, 1, 2, 3. So here it's pretty much the same: 0-star, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. The main issue with this style of flavor rating is that it's subjective. The difference between a 2 and a 3 is very subjective, and I acknowledge that. The difference between a 2 and 3 is hard to write into words, but personally I know when there's a difference. Like, I can feel it. Um, Other people might disagree, and that's where the rating system falls apart a bit for flavor. But I think it's okay that it's not perfect. It's going to be, the more you break down flavor into like specific bullet points and checkboxes, the more you're missing the point of flavor, just as a concept. So I think it's well suited that the flavor rating is somewhat subjective and like personal. But the weird thing about the flavor rating is that a 1-star flavor is not bad. A 1-star rating is not bad. So I'll explain. A 0-star flavor rating is a card whose mechanics, name, and art are either contradictory or make no sense. So this is like a card which straight up like is wrong. Like, it's called a healer, but it deals damage. That would be a 0-star. To think of an example in game, I wrote down a couple ones before, but like, I think Validated Doomsayer, there was a Reddit post after that card was revealed that was like, this card like uses the wrong name. It should be called Vindicated Doomsayer. Like, Validated Doomsayer doesn't make any sense, and they never changed it. And so I would call that a 0-star flavor because the name like literally doesn't make sense. But yeah, like, if you had a card that was a healer that was dealing damage, that would be a 0-star. Or there's a couple other cards that are like, the effect just seems very unmatched to the name / art, so that would be a 0-star. 1-star is a card whose effect generally matches the name and art. So this is like the thing about the 1-star rating is it doesn't mean it's bad flavor. It just means that it's just sufficient, like Fireball. Like, it's a fireball and it deals damage. You really can't get more specific than that. I want to reserve the 2 and 3-star for cards that really have like inspiring, good, interesting flavor. So 1-star is basically for cards that are good enough. Like, you can't do any better, but that's okay. You don't need to do better. I kind of like tallied up. I think it was, I want to say Rostacon's Rumble or Boomsday, and I basically said like, how many are 0-star, how many are 1-star, how many 2-star, how many 3-star, and I estimated that like 50 to 75% of cards in the Blizzard expansion are 1-star with this flavor rating skill, and that's perfectly okay because not every card should be a flavor masterpiece. Like, a lot of common pack fillers just need to have effects that make sense, and so 1-star is a fine rating. As long as you're getting in the 2s and 3s and you don't have any 0s, then you're fine. This is especially important when you're making an expansion, in my opinion. You want to have like a really good flavor base where you can just have flavorful cards that fit in the expansion and have effects that match their flavor. And it doesn't need to be super intricate. It just needs to work. And that's another issue with this flavor rating scale, is that flavor very much depends on the expansion, but this is a flavor rating scale which can be used to apply to individual cards. So that is an aspect which is missing from this scale. I'll just go ahead and say it. And finally, 2-star is a card whose flavor intricately represents the effect, and so this is something which oftentimes is either like specific to Warcraft or references like some game mechanic or Warcraft like location or something like that. That is like, it goes above and beyond, so the effect really well matches the name, and like, you couldn't just make the effect make the flavor more generic and it would work. Or it could be something that references a socio-cultural cliche. Again, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but like, for example, like Level Up is a paladin card that references like a game mechanic, like a common RPG trope, and it works well. And a 3-star is basically a 2-star that does it really, really well and works both in Warcraft context, expansion context. The name and art match the effect, and there is some kind of intricacy between the name, art, and effect. And so an example of a 3-star card, in my opinion, would be Sleep with the Fishes. So Sleep with the Fishes is like a common like mafia term. So you got that socio-cultural connection. Gadget's End was like the gang expansion, so you have an expansion tie-in. And then the art features a Murloc, so you got the fishes and, you know, Murloc. And then not only that, but the art for Sleep with the Fishes is a Murloc trying to be drowned. He has weights tied to him, and he's just shrugging like, I'm a fish, I can breathe underwater. And so that card has like excellent flavor, one of the best in the game in my opinion, and so that would be a 3-star. Another one I think is Doomsayer. Like, the concept of a Doomsayer or someone who's like some doomsday prepper or some kind of doomsday madman is one that exists both in real life, but also it makes sense in Warcraft because there's been lots of like cataclysms and stuff like that. The effect very well matches the name. You have like the destroy all minions. That's like the Doomsday, and then the addition of the voice line, the I lived or whatever. I was wrong. I don't remember what the voice line is, but that brings it above and beyond to a 3-star in my opinion. Okay, so I'll stop rambling. If you want to read more about these explanations, the link to this spreadsheet is in the description, and you just have to go to the bottom and click info. And if you have any questions about the rating system, just ask me in chat. And with that, I'll probably start rating cards now. That was a mouthful, but this rating system is weird, so I kind of had to get it out of the way. So we'll start with the very first card we made on stream, Vending Machines. Okay, 4 mana 3/3, Battlecry the next spell, minion, and weapon you play this turn cost 1 less. So I think for design, I think I'm going to give it a 3-star. And so the reason I think I'm going to give it a 3-star is because it really only works in weapon decks. Like, you really need to get the weapon benefit for this to be a good card. Otherwise, it's a 2 mana 3/3. And so that already limits its usability a lot. And best case scenario, you really are just getting a 1 mana 3/3 if you get all benefits. And while I think that the text box is somewhat cute and like interesting, I think the gameplay of the card is a lot less interesting than the text box kind of leads you on to think. And so that's why I'm giving it a 3 stars, because I think the effect is somewhat interesting, but the gameplay is not super interesting. It's not an unfun card, but it's not a super fun card. That's what I'm trying to say, basically. As for balance, I'm going to put it at a 2. I think it's currently too weak right now. Oh, that's not the right 2. There we go. I think it's currently too weak. I think it's balanceable, though. I think you could make this card a lot more potent and interesting by messing with the balance, but I think the design still kind of remains at a 3. So that's why I'm going to go for balance. And then for flavor, I'm a bit torn between a 1 and a 2. So I'm leaning towards 2 because, like, obviously a vending machine is, like, a real-life thing. It's kind of funny because it says vending machines. There's multiple robots in the art toppling over each other, and you have, like, the spell, minion, and weapon being things that are being vended, essentially. So that would be my reasoning for going towards 2. My reasoning for going towards 1 is that vending machines is kind of a crappy name. It's a bit too on the nose in my opinion. I think I'm going to go with a 2 just because I think it works well. Like, looking at it as a whole, holistically, the name might be a bit bad, but the effect, the art, and the name work fairly well together. So I'm going to give it a 2 for flavor. And I don't know what to do with this comments category because I'm saying a lot of the stuff that I want to be typing out loud on stream. So I might do the comments category off stream. That probably just makes more sense. But yeah, for now, I'll be using it probably just to give myself notes for later. And then, one last thing I do want to mention. I'm going to avoid changing cards generally. Once we make a card like we've made it, there's a couple exceptions. If there's like a glaring balance flaw that I can just like easily get out of the way, then I'll do that. I can think of like one example of a card that I know like it really should just have 1 less attack. Like it currently power creeps a good card, and it just makes way more sense if it has 1 less attack. So that is my reasoning behind that. What about typos? Yeah, so typos I'm correct, and like poor wordings I'll correct. I'll probably do that off screen, and I'll leave myself a comment. Scorp just added me telling myself to put the card name somewhere in the dock because it's going to get hard to navigate. That's a good suggestion, Scorp. I don't know if you're still watching the stream, but I will definitely do that, probably after stream, because you probably don't want to hear me go through and type all of that right now. But yeah, I think I kind of just laid out everything. It took me like 20 minutes to say all that, but I think everything I wanted to say has been said. So, so number 2, Void Rip. So this card was the idea for a like collectible hero power card. So it's deal 2 damage to a minion in your hero, repeatable once per turn. So basically, it's permanently repeatable. It stays in your hand forever. Yeah, you missed the first 20 minutes. Depending on how much you care about the rating system that I'm using, you might want to actually go back and rewind and listen to what I have to say, because it is pretty important. Some of it you can just get by reading the info tab if you have this spreadsheet open. Okay, cool, Scorp. But yeah, that's up to you, Dario, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so for Void Rip, The repeatable once per turn mechanic was an idea to create basically collectible hero powers that aren't in the vein of Dinomancy or Shadow Form. So once this card is in your hand, it essentially acts like a hero power from your hand. I'm trying to think about how interesting this mechanic is for players. I think it's actually fairly interesting for players. You can create pretty complex, like quote-unquote hero powers just by writing the effect. Like there are some concerns with like Dinomancy where you have to say like your hero power becomes and then type out the effect. Whereas here you can just type out the effect and then the repeatable once per turn is like the hero power clause. And so that makes the cards easy to parse, especially if you have them in an expansion. So I think the design space for this mechanic is pretty large. I honestly think this could even become a keyword effect. So repeatable once per turn could become something like shock or I don't know, some random keyword name. I'm not very creative right now. That's why I'm not designing cards. That's why I'm reviewing cards. So I think I'm going to tentatively give this a 4 because I think the effect has a lot of room to be explored. There's definitely some issues with Void Rip specifically. I think it's interesting how the effect kind of calls back to the base hero power. It still deals 2 damage to your hero, but now it's dealing 2 damage to a minion. But like there's room for more interesting showcases for this mechanic, so I'm going to give it a 4 tentatively. As for balance of this particular card, it's like probably slightly better than the Warlock hero power in some situations, and you can use it in addition to your hero power. Of course, you still have to draw that card, and it's kind of a dead draw in that way. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2. I think it require play testing. It's unsure to tell. It's unsure whether this card is currently balanced, but I think it can be play tested pretty easily. And this kind of goes for the collectible hero power mechanic as a whole. As for flavor, this is a very good example of a 1. Oh, that's a 0. I'm still getting used to my keyboard shortcuts. This is Void Rip is like it just sounds like some kind of attack, and the text box is some kind of damaging thing. So this is a great example of a 1-star flavor. It makes sense, but it's not like amazing. Alright, so next card, Thundering Footsteps. 3-mana hunter spell. Until you draw a minion, your card draws also deal 1 damage to all minions. So I think this was a top-down card, from what I remember. It was not top-down from the art, but top-down from the concept of a Thundering Footsteps, like awaiting till you draw your big beast. So that was the idea behind the card. Until you draw a minion, your card draws also deal 1 damage to all minions. So, big things I'm noticing, dealing 1 damage to all minions is not a super hunter thing. It has this weird dichotomy between like wanting to be a spell hunter card, which was not my intent, and wanting to be a big hunter card. In some cases, this is the rest of the game. In some cases, this literally happens for 0 turns, or 1 turn. It depends on whether the minion draw will actually deal 1 damage to all minions. I do like the kind of way that it acts as like a grind card, so it just like grinds down your opponent's board until you draw that big minion, and then you can build a board and respond. I think that's something this card has going for it. I'm stuck between a 2-star and a 3-star right now. I think I'm gonna put it as 2-star because I'm not really feeling this card too much. I think it has an interesting concept and it could be iterated upon. One thing I just would quickly want to highlight about the design ratings is that a 3-star card can mean that it is the best iteration of a concept, but the concept has some inherent design flaws that can't be fixed. I think Thundering Footsteps could be a 3-star card. I think with a little bit more iteration it could get to a 3-star card, but the base concept is definitely flawed and my execution was a bit flawed, so that's why I'm going with 2. Okay, balance. Again, like I said, this can go for the entire game, it can go for 1 turn. I'm going to put it as 1 star because I don't think it's egregiously balanced right now. It's not really bad, but like it's very polarizing. Even if this card is perfectly balanced, it's a very polarizing card. So I'm going to give it a 1 star. And for flavor, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2 star. I think the flavor is neat, and especially if you get some particle effects and sound effects in there, I think this could be a very cool card to play. It definitely has like a certain feel to it. Alright, everybody's favorite card that I've ever made on stream. The one that everyone always talks about in chat, despite it being the most boring card. Just kidding. Time Walker Warden, 3-mana 1/7, Mogushan Warden power creep. when I designed this card, I literally did not even realize that we named it Ward. Like, I just chose Warden because it was like a synonym for guard or like defender, but it's literally the same word that's used in Morgashad and Warden, which I almost think adds a comical element to the card. For balance, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 3 actually. So, actually, I'm almost leaning towards 4. But I think boldly power creeping cards, power creeping quotation marks, of course, because the definition of power creep is a bit more intricate than simply printing a card which is stronger than another card. But the idea of pushing cards to their limits is really neat. I think that it's probably a bit dangerous in neutral. Not this card specifically, but the whole concept of pushing cards to their limits in neutral. I guess, I mean, let me look at my rating system. What did I say for 4 stars? A well-designed card with few flaws, but might be narrow in utility or enjoyment. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 4-star rating, actually, I think it's neat as a concept. A lot of people were obviously interested in it, and no one's complaining about, like, it's so broken or anything like that. So I think a lot of players would like to see this in the game. Stuff like Evil Heckler wasn't really that well received at first because, like, Booty Bay Guard or whatever was like really bad, and the 5/4 taunt stat line, in my opinion, is very awkward. They've been pretty reserved about strictly power creeping cards, at least until recently, but like the first 2 power creeps were like, and I'm using power creeping quotation marks, were like Ice Rager and Booty Bay Guard, and Evil Heckler, which are like really awkward stat lines, and no one wanted to use those cards even after they were power creeped. So it can walk through time, indeed. Now I think Time Walker is like a World of Warcraft like group. So for balance, I'm gonna give it a 2. Oh my gosh, I do this. Yeah, it's subjective to rate my own cards, but you missed the first 20 minutes where I explained that's the whole point of this. It's a reflection on design as a whole, but myself a designer. So like my purpose for the spreadsheet is to, like, as objectively as possible, rate my own cards. Using, like, as objective as possible, like, player mindsets rather than my mindset as a designer. Oh, you just went back and watched that part? But yeah, the point of this is to rate my own cards and then learn lessons for myself, and then, like, maybe, like, distill those lessons for others. So, like, if someone wants to argue that this is a 3-star or a 2-star or a 1-star, I can provide my best reasoning as to why I think it's 4-star, but, like, ultimately, like, you're right, it is subjective. I mean, it's going to be subjective no matter what, unless we literally crowdsource like a vote system. So yeah, you are kind of right. I'm going to go with 2-star for balance because it's easily playtestable and easily modifiable, and it's probably balanced in its current state. I think it's a bit egregious to give this a 3-star balance, since balance is the point of contention of the card, so they're obviously going to playtest this. I can't just immediately say it's balanced without playing it. So flavor. So the flavor is pretty generic, so I'm gonna give it a 1. It fits by the most like in the most basic way, really. So yeah. Okay, so Erudite Illusionist. Oh, also I should probably put art sources in here. So yeah, slowly, it'll take me a while, but I'll update the directly rate cards in the spreadsheet via commands. I think it's technically possible because Google Sheets has a scripting feature. I do like that idea. I'm pretty busy. It'd actually be pretty funny if Tao could do that for me. I'm pretty busy. I'll see about it. If it happens, it's gonna be like at the very end, and it's gonna be all 300 cards at once. And it'll probably be like you can react 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, something like that, or what you would use numbers, and it'll probably be in a Discord channel. So we'll see about that. I don't know how many people would participate in it. There's probably a base of about like 15 people who like actively come into the streams in and out. You think it's a great idea? That sounds good. I think it would be cool to compare at least my ratings to your guys' ratings. Food for thought. Yeah. No, I agree. I like that suggestion. It was a good suggestion. Okay, Erudite Illusionist. Discover a spell. If you've casted this game, it costs 3. I think this card is like really perplexing to players. Like, not in almost in the DIY design type of way, but it doesn't even have the payoff that DIY design does. It's like once you finally kind of realize how to use this card, you're still like, okay, wait, what? So I think that's like definitely a -1 star penalty. Like this card is very confusing, not in a mechanical way, but in like a how do I use this way. I think the effect is a bit neat. It definitely like augments discover. There's an issue with not knowing which spells you've cast this game, unless the discover could directly modify the cost, and like it could be in red and green or something like that. So I'll probably give it a 3. So a 3 for uniqueness, but like a 3 for also being a very confusing and unlikely card to be in the game. As for balance, I'll give it a 2 because it's balanceable. Yeah, yellow highlight and discovers. That would actually be cool. That would actually be very cool. I'm going to give it a 2 because it's balanceable. That's about all I have to say. It's balanceable. Probably fine in its current state. And for flavor, so I think there's something interesting in that erudite means like overly smart or trying to be really smart. And so the idea is that this mage has cast all the spells. She already knows everything. And so that's where erudite comes from. But I don't think that intricacy warrants giving this card a 2-star flavor. So I'm going to give it a 1-star flavor. One day I'll learn my keyboard shortcuts. Okay. Tarot readings. Discover a minion from your opponent's hand, deck, or battlefield. So write out, like, first thing that jumps, how many Hearthstone packs can you buy for $9.99? Why are you asking me this? Or is this some joke that I'm not getting? Tarot reading. So the first thing that jumps out to me about this card is that it produces very, very varied gameplay. Highly varied gameplay. Like, the board state, hand state, and deck state, like, change a bunch, both during a game and in between games. And so this card, like, it always has a different outcome, which I think is really cool. I think it's also a bit flavorful that the tarot readings always have a different outcome. Yep, it's 1 from each. That's correct. A bit unclear, but I think that the conditions in which you play the card are the same. If you're playing this card, like, you're gonna play in the same situation no matter what. So I'm gonna give this card a 4-star. I think it's pretty cool. I think the thing preventing it from being a 5-star is that it's overly complex. A bit overly complex, a bit unexplained, and yeah, it's a bit weird how Battlefield like sometimes has 0 minions, and then what happens. As for balance, I think I'm going to give it a 3 stars. I think it's very well balanced in its current state, supports Thief Priest in a good way. It can be modified if necessary. Whoa, what the heck did I just do? Wait, no, I just like closed it. Okay. It can be balanced further, but I think it's in a really good state, so I'm going to give it a 3. And for flavor, I'll give it a 1. I don't think that the tarot readings flavor is very intricate. It's pretty overdone, but it works, so. Alright, Ice Sculptor. Battlecry. Add 2 copies of a frozen minion to your hand. So for design, I'm either going to give this a 2-star or a 3-star. I mean, I'd like to hear some opinions in chat, but it's like really hard to use. It can be used in like 2 classes. You could use it with like the couple. Yes, Scorchiopus is a Scorpref indeed, because the design process was inspired by one of his cards. So yeah, that's the thing with Ice Sculptor. It's really hard to utilize in a lot of classes. Probably doesn't need to be neutral. It's neat how it can go on enemies and friendlies, but I don't know. I don't think this card excites a bunch of players. I think it makes players fall asleep because it bores them. So I'm going to give it a 2-star. As for balance, I'll give it a 2-star because it's completely balanceable. And then for flavor, I'll give it... I'm almost tempted to give it 0 stars, but 0 stars is reserved for cards that like straight up don't make sense. So I'm gonna give it a 1-star because it's an Ice Sculptor, and he creates copies of minions encased in ice. So that's like good enough. I don't think there's much more to say about this card. Okay, Green Thumb, 1 mana, Druid card, summon a 2/2 Treant. So I think in order to evaluate the design of this card, I would need to go on like a really long rant about Treant Druid and what I think about it. think the goal of treants is to summon many of them. The least amount of treants you could possibly summon is 2 with landscaping, and I think it's a bit against the mechanic to be only summoning 1. It kind of just feels like a collectible treant. It really is just a collectible treant. I mean, yeah, it's boring. It is a common. And when I was designing this card, I said something like, ideally this card would be introduced retroactively into Druid's classic set if a card were to be Hall of Famed. And actually didn't Naturalize get Hall of Fame? So this card like would ideally replace Naturalize. Looking at the other like replace cards, we have like the Pilfer card and the Demon card and the Mage card or whatever. I might be wrong. I don't know if there was a Demon card, but like they're really boring and simple and support like a very basic class theme. And even Pilfer's like retroactively supports the Burgle Rogue theme, even though there's no Burgle Rogue cards up until TGT, from what I know. So, this card works in a similar way in that it would retroactively support Treant Druid before Treant Druid was a thing. Of course, there are Treant cards in Classic, but the archetype wasn't formed yet. So I'm gonna give it a 3. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain myself further after what I just said. As for balance, I think I'm gonna give it a 3. I think it's perfectly balanced in its current state. I don't think it can be balanced differently, but I think it's okay because I think it's perfectly balanced. And as for flavor, it gets a 1 because it just makes sense. It doesn't do anything more than make sense. Okay, Serenite Duplicate. Your spells cost 1 more, but also summon a 2/2 elemental. So this card originally summoned more Serenite Duplicates, which got weird quick because your spells cost 2 more and summon 2 Serenite Duplicates. And it's not necessarily swingy, it's just like bad. Because like once they start costing 2 more, they're like impossible to cast. It's like a really cheap Violet Teacher. Would just be run as a 1-mana 2/2 in aggro. Well, yeah, I guess there was really never a 1-mana 2/2 in neutral. Okay, so for that, I'm gonna give this a 2 probably. I'm gonna say that this could be a 3, maybe even a 4 at its best iteration, but I don't think I like where it currently is. I think it would require a lot of number tweaking, and I think that its best use case is to run this with really cheap spells, but that's already what you're doing with token decks. And so the goal of making a different version of Violet Teacher is completely lost because it's just the same version of Violet Teacher, it's just the numbers are different, really. So that's my opinion on that. Bounce, I'm going to give it a 1 star. Or I guess it really should be 2 stars because it's probably balanceable. But I don't think you can balance this in a way that makes it effectively any different from a Violet Teacher. I'm going to give it a 1 star in balance. And for flavor, it gets a 1 because it makes sense. Okay, Volatile Fester Brute. I think this is going to be our first 5-star design. This card works as both Death Rattle Tech, Death Rattle Synergy. It has a ton of interaction with the opponent. You can deck build around it. Results in varied gameplay. I think this card is great. Balance. So it's a 3-mana 2/6. It definitely just needs playtesting, I would say. So I'm gonna just put it at a 2. Doesn't really need much more discussion. It just needs playtesting. And flavor, I almost want to give it a 2, but I really don't think there's anything that's pointing this towards a 2. I think it's just a 1. I think I might give this Arcane Transmogrifier a 2 though, because I think it works well in Dalaran, and it works well with the transmog flavor, which is like a Warcraft kind of reference. So I think I'm going to give this card a 2. The first card to get a 2, I think. No, the second one. But yeah, like I said, the balance and flavor ratings don't really matter that much. It's more of a way of categorizing rather than rating. I think if I was on a 5-star scale for flavor, I would be torn between 2 constantly because it's just too hard to pick one. Okay, design for Arcane Transmogrifier. It's a bit weird because it's like a weapon buff card that like destroys your weapon. I think it does it in a flavorful way. Instead of saying like destroy your weapon and equip a 3/2, it transforms it. Avoids death rattles, which is like irrelevant if not a slight downside, because there's no negative death rattle weapons in Rogue. I think it has a nice duality between the 3/2 body and the 3/2 spellblade. I'm probably gonna give it a 4. I think it works by default with the hero power, but my only thing pointing this towards a 3 would be that there's actually like no synergy with this card, and it has slight anti-synergy with weapons. So it's really not a weapon support card. It's not like a weapon rogue support card. It's just a weapon support card for rogue. It's just a good card in rogue that relies on weapons. So nothing like a Lucky Do Buccaneer. And as for balance, I think I'm gonna give it a 3 because I think it's really well balanced, as is. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. Alright. Wizard for Hire. 2 mana 0/7. Your spells cost 3 less. After you cast a spell, switch sides. Okay, I think I'm going to give this a 2 on flavor, because I think the name and effect work together well, like better than most cards do. It's like a wizard that's like constantly switching sides and just casting and boosting spells for whoever he wants, basically. He's greedy. And it works like well enough in Dalaran, which is where I put it, so reluctantly giving it a 2. As for design, like the biggest concern with this card is very similar to the Erudite Illusionist card, in that it is like pretty hard to parse for a new player. It's kind of above the complexity of a rare. It uses the switch sides, which has never been in a collectible card. It's appeared in Adventures before and Tavern Brawls. That being said, the effect is pretty cool. It empowers like both players to cast spells, so it's a fun card for both players. And it's not like too difficult to remove. I almost think it might be a bit too game invading. If every player is casting a spell each turn, this thing will pretty much never die. So being able to play a 2-mana card, a 2-mana rare card that like basically changes the rules of the game. It basically says spells cost 1 less this game, or 3. Like your first spell each turn costs 3 less, is like way too much of an impact on the game itself that a 2-mana rare card should have. So I'm gonna give it 3 stars. So I think it has some things going for it. I think at its core, the design concept is flawed, and if you reduce your spells cost X less, like make it 1, then it becomes a card that you will never run. So, and as for balance, I'm gonna give it a 1 too, because I don't think there's a balanceable version of this card which remains fun to play or enticing to players. Okay, Lone Casanova, 6 mana 3/2. Battle Cry. Destroy all minions that have the same attack as another minion. So, like, first of all, this is really dangerous because it's destroy minions in neutral. It's pretty expensive. It can destroy itself, which is weird. It definitely requires 2 reads, but it is an epic card, so it's maybe okay on this card. Counters token decks in a like decent enough way. I almost don't like how it's in Gadgetzan, because it like acts like it's having hand buff synergy when it doesn't have any hand buff synergy really. And so I think I'm gonna go with 3 star in the balance. I kind of want to give it 4 because I think the effect is neat, and I think it's like a fair but interesting effect. I just don't think there's a lot of ways that the player can interact with this card. Whether that be in deck building or during gameplay, the outcome of this card is usually out of the player's control, and so that's why it gets a 3-star. As for balance, I think this card is very difficult to evaluate in its current state, very meta dependent, very deck dependent, and so I'm going to give it a 2-star because I think it's generally pretty easy to balance once you have played with it enough. I could be wrong, but playtesting would reveal that. And for flavor, I'm either giving it a 1 or a 2. I think I'll give it a 2 because I think that it fits within Gadgetzan and the effect matches the name, and it's a bit intricate in that the minions who love each other by having the same attack die. Maybe that's a stretch. Maybe I'm crazy, but... Alright, Trade of the Tricks. I think I'm going to start with flavor. I think I'm going to give this a 3-star flavor. The effect matches the name. The name is thematic to Rogue. The art is very cute. It's like two people, like someone pickpocketing someone and then being pickpocketed at the same time. And it has like kind of a socio-cultural cliche because tricks of the trade is like a phrase. So I think I'm gonna give this a 3-star flavor. I think it's a pretty unique card, like flavor-wise, from a flavor perspective. As for design, so it's a rogue secret. Someone asked to design a rogue secret, so we designed a rogue secret. When an opposing hero power is used, counter it and gain a 0-cost spell copy of it. So it brings back the dart trap condition, which I think is somewhat interesting. Countering a hero power is definitely a bit weird. It certainly is like self-explanatory. There's no like confusion of what happens. The gain a 0-cost spell copy of it is probably a bit weird. I think I'll give it a 4. Despite all its oddities, I'm going to give it a 3 for balance, just because I think that it's really balanced in its current state. Like, you're paying 2 mana, your opponent loses 2 mana in quotation marks, and then you draw a card basically, because most hero powers, default hero powers at least, are worth 0 mana. So it's like 2 mana. If you add it up very naively, the 2 mana you pay is counteracted by the 2 mana your opponent pays, so it's 0 mana, draw a card, delayed. That's extremely naive way of looking at the balance of the card, but since there's so much stuff going on, I had to break it down in the simplest form possible. So I'm going to give it a 3-star for balance. Okay, Face Finder. After a minion is played, copy its attack. So this card is pretty weird because it relies a lot on both players. I like how you can kind of like surprise buff it at the last second if you have something in your hand. It supports deck building, but is not good enough or impactful enough to build a deck by itself, which I think is a benefit since it's a rare card. So it probably shouldn't spawn an entirely new deck as a rare card. But it maybe fits into aggro, something like that, like a high attack variant of aggro, almost like a Quest Druid, but not really, because Quest Druid was usually big. So I'm gonna give it 3 stars. So I'm docking points for it being kind of weird and game warping, and I think that it just feels awkward as a 3-mana 0/4. No offense to Toothy Chest, but I don't think that card was very well designed. So I think balance is a 2 tentatively. I don't think it's so polarizing that it warrants a 1-star rating, but the effect is certainly polarizing and would need to be play tested to get a good like stat line found for it. So yeah, and the flavor gets a 1 because it's just generic, doesn't really do anything. Okay. Hungry Box. 5 mana 0/7. Battle cry. Destroy the highest health minion. Death rattle. Draw 2 cards. So this card is like really weird to parse because it targets itself. It might not be immediately clear, but it can target itself. So it's a neutral 5 mana Arcane Intellect or a neutral 5 mana 0/7 Death rattle. Draw 2 cards. Battle cry. Destroy an enemy minion. It's very strange. That being said, I think players would almost like this card. It doesn't have as much deck building potential as something like Meat Wagon, but Meat Wagon was pretty well received, and it's a very goofy card to use. You have to like buff a minion and then have it die, and then you play a very specifically crafted deck. This is a bit different. This more relies around like playing this at the right time, and building a deck that can afford to run a 5 mana draw 2 cards. And it also just kind of is nice to have a very overcosted Arcane Intellect in neutral. I don't think it's very dangerous having 5 mana draw 2 cards in neutral, even though I think that neutral draw should be restricted. So I think I'm going to give this 4 cards. 4 stars. Not 4 cards. Sorry about that. As for balance, I'll give it a 2. I don't know if it's balanced in its current state, but it easily can be, in my opinion. Might be a bit polarizing. It's really weird because as you drop the health, it can destroy more enemy minions, and then it becomes easier to kill. So like tweaking numbers on this card is very hard. So it's something that playtesting would have to reveal. And then for flavor, like the name is like a reference to a melee player. So I'm just gonna give it 1 star. Like either way, a mimic flavor is fine in my opinion. It could have a better Hearthstone fitting name. I generally have not gone for meme card names on the stream, but I had to do it. I don't know. Okay, Blast Zone. This turn, your cards cost 1 and both heroes are immune. I might be a bit biased. I think someone said they didn't really get this card when I showed it, but I think I'm going to give this 5 stars. I think it pushes Warrior in a very interesting direction, a direction that it was kind of headed with KNC, but didn't have the juice to get there. This rewards you for running both big minions and spells. There was a big spell released in Rise of Shadows. The both heroes are immune clause gives it a great bit of flavor, so I think I'm going to give it a 2-star flavor. Especially with the visual effect that I was imagining is that a steel wall kind of encompasses the arena and both heroes are kind of blocked off from play. So I think the flavor works well on this card. And as for balance, I don't want to give it a 1 because I think there's a sweet spot for this card, so I'm going to give it a 2. This is somewhat subjective. I think there's a sweet spot for this card. I'm basically saying with this 2-star rating that I think that playtesting will reveal a balanced version of this card. Obviously the whole point of playtesting is to find that out, so I don't know whether that's true, but that's why I'm giving it a 2-star rating. Repeat Researcher, 3 mana 2/5. Discover a card that has already been discovered this game. So I think I'm going to give this card a 2-star flavor. Maybe 3? The thing that would be bordering on 3 for me is that the text box like almost reads like an English sentence, like discover a formula that has already been discovered before. You know what I mean? So it's the wording is like flavorful wording that's not flavor wording. That sounds weird to say, but so I think I'm gonna give it a 3 actually for flavor. And the idea is that he's just like a very naive researcher who always discovers things that have already been discovered, like the wheel or water. I don't know, something random like that. As for design, it's a bit interesting because it can, like Columbus. It's a bit interesting because it can like give you information on stuff your opponent has discovered. It's a bit parasitic to the discover mechanic, so probably why I'll give it a 4-star rating. But you can build a deck around it, and it will generally also just work most games because discover effects are pretty common. And it also like adds extra decision making to your discovers. So You might discover something earlier in the game differently, knowing you have this card in your deck, than you would in a different game where you don't have this card in your deck. And then for balance, I'm honestly going to give it a 3-star. I think this card is as balanced as it can be. It is a 3-mana 2/5 that does nothing on its own, but depending on conditions, can generate you a card. I don't think it's going to be played in aggro, so it's not like a concern that you're getting too much value or anything like that for an aggro deck, or too much fuel. Palm Plume Leader. So this is 4-mana 2/3 battle cry. Summon a random minion with cost equal to the number of minions you control. Okay, hold on. I kind of want to start with flavor. I'm debating whether this should be 1-star or 2-star. So the idea is that she's like a cheerleading captain, and that cheerleaders, when they're in formation, like, depending on how many there are, they like form up, and then like raise them to the sky. So it sounds like a stretch, but the idea is that you're empowered based on how many minions you control. So I think the connection between effect and flavor is intricate. Like, it's more than just surface level. So I think I'm going to give it 2 stars for flavor. As for design, like, the actual effect is less complicated than it is made out to be. It's essentially a Frostwolf Warlord that summons minion with cost equal to, rather than getting +1/+1. That being said, I think that the heaviness, the density of the text box requires that the card be epic. I don't think that's a huge detriment to the card's design. Just something to note, that it's more of a rare that has to be an epic because of the density of the wording. I think it's a pretty interesting card. There's some build around potential. Reminds me of some of the KNC epics. They're basically just spike cards. Almost all the KNC epics: Arcane Tyrant, Cavern Creeper, Spiteful. Yeah, like KNC's epics were like just like good cards. Just put them in your deck, build it around it a little bit, but just like some powerful effects. I think Palm Plume Leader is like that. I think some of the KNC cards were well received. Some of the KNC epics were well received. Some of them weren't. But I don't think this one is as dangerous as stuff like Quarter Creeper was. So I'm gonna give it a 4. 4 for design. And I don't want to have to like think about all the possible possibilities. So maybe this is me lazily giving it a 2. I don't think it's most balanced in its current state. There's a lot of things you could change. You could add 1 to the mana cost, subtract 1, and change the stats in a total variety of ways. So playtesting will reveal a probably slightly better version of this card. Okay, this might be the last one. I feel like I'm kind of on a roll, but I'm also like tired. So I'm talking a lot, and my mouth is dry, and I don't have anything to drink. So this might be my last one. We'll see. Before I do end the stream, I just want to know if you guys think this was interesting, insightful, boring, better than when I design cards, worse than when I design cards. Really, just any of your comments I would like to hear. Because like I can do this off stream, or I could do it on stream. I can record it and upload it to YouTube. It really doesn't matter. It's nice having live feedback, but like it's not necessary. You like it, Dario? Well, that's good. I almost feel like by rambling out loud, I have like refined my ratings into one that makes more sense. So that's funny that you say that. I've never had someone say that to me before. Talk said that my voice was like the least sharp voice he had ever heard. So I don't know how to take that, but yeah, I mean, I'll definitely just like do this more then. I can maybe just do it like after stream or before stream. So I do want to like obviously keep designing cards, and in the roughly 40 minutes that I have been like intently reviewing cards, we've reviewed about 20 cards. So it's about 2 cards per minute. So we have about 150 cards left. So 150 times 2 is 300 minutes. So that is 5 more hours. So if I do an hour a day, I could get this part done in about 5 days. And so I think if we do about 45 minutes a day, we'll like by the end of the month be like perfectly catching up. So on the final day, we'll like design our 10 cards and then review them. that probably won't happen because I want to like give myself a couple days away from the cards before I review them. But anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. So I'll review Diligent Archivist. So it's a 3-mana 3/3. At the start of your turn, at the start of your turn, return this to your hand. Battlecry, draw a card. I'm torn between a 4-star and 5-star on this card. It provides a really interesting interaction between you and your opponent. It's like a reusable 3-mana draw. It kind of has like a pseudo taunt without directly having it. For flavor, I reluctantly give it a 1, I think. I don't think the... Actually, I'll give it a 2. I think that the Diligent connotation that she is like just continuously archiving cards no matter what. She doesn't want to fight. She just wants to keep working. I think that's good enough to elevate it to a 2. And as for design... I'm gonna use the comment box for once. Decide between 4 or 5. I'm gonna give it a 4 right now, but I might be a bit biased, but I think this effect is really neat and provides really interesting gameplay. My only concern is that this is the type of card that if revealed, players would be like, yawn, or like, this is a bad card, I'm not gonna play with this. I'm a bit biased in thinking that it produces interesting gameplay, therefore it's a well-designed card, because in the end, if no one's playing the card, it's probably not well-designed. So, that's why I'm leaning towards 4-star. As for balance, I'm going to give it a 3 because I think it's as balanced as it can be. I think it... actually, I don't know. I think I'm going to give it a 3. I think it's as balanced as it can be. I think 2 mana, like, ruins the point. Based on stuff like Gurubachi Offering, these cheap cards that your opponent wants to kill, like, never work out. I mean, there is Doomsayer. Like, that's a cheap card that your opponent wants to kill, and that card provides really interesting gameplay. So, okay, I'm going to put it back at 2, actually. Because I think this card could be refined. In the balance category, at least. Gosh, there's so many cards in here. I just, like, forget about half these cards, honestly. Dude, some of these cards in this section right here are really bad. I made them when there was, like, no one watching the stream, and I was just like, fuck, I don't want to make cards today, and I was just, like, cranking them out. But, I mean, that's something I want to, like, reflect on at the end, is, like, can you burn out from designing cards? I think the answer is yes. But I think 10 cards a day is not too unreasonable. I'm not, like, ridiculously burnt out. And I think there's still interesting ideas as we go on, so. And this is coming from someone who has designed, like, hundreds of cards in the past, so. I've already made a lot of card ideas, so there's still a lot of card ideas to be made. And despite only having 4 lines of text, Hearthstone has a lot of design space. It's a very well-designed game. So yeah, I think doing this card review stuff was pretty fun. I enjoy doing it. I'm glad you like it, Dario. I don't think anyone else commented, but that's probably going to be it for today. Tomorrow I'll be back making cards, and I'll probably do a little bit more of the review stuff. So I'll probably do 10 cards of review tomorrow, and do 10 cards that I actually make. So, and if you have any questions or comments, just add me on Discord, of course. But besides from that, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.